Welcome to Warriors at Work. This is Jeannie Coomber, your guide and host. Warriors at Work is a place where everyone in the workplace can come together, gain insight, encouragement, tell stories, connect, and share wisdom. We are a place of like-minded people at different stages of life, all coming together with a shared interest of enlightening and inspiring one another. If you're interested in going from the predictable to the potent, and you want to find your warrior magic, step into the journey with us. Welcome to Warriors at Work. So hi everybody, it's Jeannie. I'm so happy to bring this conversation to you here at the Warriors at Work podcast. My next guest is a beautiful friend and colleague, and this conversation came about through a recent interaction we had where I reached out to her a couple of weeks ago when I was really feeling tired and overwhelmed and frankly fatigued from this year. Not just your typical fatigue that you get as you're wrapping up the year end, but I knew that COVID was creating something different for me, and I was really starving for some self-care, but I didn't even know how to do it. And Naketa is such an expert in this space. So through that conversation and the wisdom she offered me right then and there on the spot, I knew, okay, it's time for us to do another podcast. So Naketa's been a guest on this podcast a bunch of different times. And again, she is a dear friend, dear colleague. She's a confidant. She's somebody I go to often for her perspective. So I am so excited to bring you her wisdom. So let me tell you a little bit about Naketa. So Naketa Ren Thigpen is a licensed clinical social worker who broke barriers and glass ceilings nearly 10 years ago when she architected her professional skill set as a psychotherapist, a trauma specialist, a sexologist, and a relationship expert. She's now regarded as the #1 balance and relationship advisor in the world. And Naketa's been the go-to for fast-scaling married women entrepreneurs and power couples seeking to balance love and success without dimming or apologizing for their spirited ambition. You should just put my name right next to that. She is also the creator of the breakthrough paradigm, the Joy Map Method. She's an international best-selling author of one of the most beautiful books I have ever read, Selfish. She's a transformative empowerment speaker, and she's CEO of Thigpro Balance and Relationship Management Institute. She and her team are out there every single day, inspiring all of us to amplify intimacy across all aspects of our life. She's also creating safe spaces for these crucial conversations as a leading podcast host. Her podcast is Balance Boldly. She's a wife, she's a mother, she's a minister, and she's a grandmother, affectionately called G Bunny. And I am so deeply grateful to call you my friend. So Naketa, thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, Jeannie, I love you so much. You know this already. Thank you for having me once again. I am always honored.
Oh, I just can't get enough of you. So here's where I want to start. I know myself and I know the listeners of this podcast, and I'm going to call myself an A-type because that's who I am and I wear it proudly. And when I think of the word pause or permission to pause, it feels like a bad word to me. And I immediately go in my brain to, am I going to lose my edge? Am I going to be less productive? What's going to fall if I step into the pause? But you talk about pausing as something that is tied to something much, much deeper on an emotional level. So talk to us about that.
Yeah, no, I totally resonate with that. So, classically, I was a type A person, like, 5 years ago, even if I would have taken all the personality tests all over again, it would still have had me as type A. Now I fall into something that's more, not spoken about as often as a type E, where I'm like the perfect blend of insane meets imperfection. Um, where, type A as yourself, which is my reform state, is everything is in perfection. You have no problem being excellent. It's literally the back of your hand. Like you breathe, you walk, you talk excellence, or it's not happening. You won't enter a conversation if it can't be with the state of integrity of excellence that you can bring to it. And honestly, that was my resolve too. And it was what wound me up and burnt me out, quite honestly. So it's no problem being type A, right? Like I'm over 40, I'm well over 40, and I'm definitely, reforming from type A because I had to kind of welcome in that wasn't serving me anymore in that natural state. You can be phenomenal, do all the great things, but redefining what's important to you as you do those things and pour that energy into it is kind of where the pausing came in for me. Is I don't want to not be excellent, right? Like I don't want to not show up fully in all the things that I do, but I don't want to do that with everything. I don't want to go to the birthday party and have to be type A. I don't, like sometimes we just need to come all the way down and not necessarily need your inner circle to do with it. Cause we'll all, have our inner circles and be comfortable and feel safe and come all the way down. But how often do we chat and circle up, especially now, right? With 2020, with our inner circles and allow that time to like use bad language and talk about horrible things that make you laugh and feel, and I don't mean like, divisive things, just things that are really cheeky and funny that feel really comfortable with your girls and guy friends. And because we don't have that now, especially in 2020, in the normal ways that we do, because we're zoomed out, right? Like we're all burnt out from the Zooming, the constant meetings, the, phone calls, like all the things that technology is great for has really overstimulated us. And it took away the one space that we could usually rely on that, quarterly get together with our sister friends or whoever your kind of inner circle is, where you can come down. So pausing down allows you to recharge in a healthy way. So you can show up in excellence with the things that matter, not every single moment of every day, because you just get spent out.
I just took a big breath when you just shared that, especially when you said when you're going to birthday parties or you're being with family, you still don't have to think of yourself as having to be excellent in everything.
Yeah.
Like my shoulders dropped. And the other thing that you just said really resonated. You're right. The outlets that we would normally use to decompress and process and recharge are not readily available, if at all. Mm-hmm. So we have to be more creative about this idea of pausing, which makes me think of when you think about your work as a balance and relationship advisor, just over the last 8 months or so, what are you seeing in people's personal and professional lives? Like what's the most common pieces of advice you're putting out there?
Yeah, I'm not seeing people be selfish enough, honestly. And I know it feels like an inverse statement to say when you think about pausing for self-care and self-love and all the gooey things that we put around that verbiage. And you know me personally, so you know what my heart and my intention is around how I've redefined the word selfish. But just to, help all the listeners have a breath of what it is, selfish is really a personal, intimate gift filled with the joy that you create. So when you're selfish, you're able to have the space that you need to choose when you can dig into your personal transformation, whatever those tactics, techniques are that you need, that energized space of safety that you can create for yourself. It's allowing yourself to heal from the trauma, letting go of the toxic people, breaking free of expectations. I mean, we can go on, inner child healing, rescripting descriptive and destructive patterns, like the brilliance that's bound, learning to forgive yourself, like all those things are built in to the gift you give yourself when you choose to be intentionally selfish. And because people aren't choosing that, because they've bought into the really negative definition of, it's self-care is not selfish. I'm like, yes, it is. It is selfish to choose to stop everything else that you're doing, to stop allowing the leeches to leech from you, to stop over giving because you're trying to give into this broken part of yourself when you're constantly over giving to someone else. Because it's really not about them when you're an over giver, right? Like, it's really about you fulfilling a need that was unmet by someone in your past at some point, but that's a whole different conversation. But when you're selfish and you stop all of that, you allow yourself that safety, that space to do all the things that you need to recharge, renew, and, kind of recommit your own intimate connection with yourself. So I literally get paid to tell people how to be more selfish. Like that's what it comes down to. And there's lots of advanced tools and techniques and all the things, but we're like breaking free from all of the negative norms. Like, normal doesn't have to be necessary. 2020 should have shown all of us that, right? Like, all of our norms were ripped away from us on one degree or another. And for some of us, we realized that some of those things we thought was normal, traveling for 16 hours a day, 25 phone calls, 3 lunches where you never finished your coffee, wasted time, whatever the case was, it was not necessary.
You described my average schedule right there. You just described my average schedule
for many of us.
I was just thinking about this morning. Yeah. I was just thinking about this morning as I was thinking about this podcast interview where I journal every morning. And one of the things that I do is this gratitude piece. And one of the things that I'm grateful for, while I miss seeing clients in person and I miss a lot of the energetic vibe that comes out of the quote unquote traveling, I don't miss spending 4+ hours in the car. I don't miss traffic going in and out of New York City and rushing from garage to lunches to breakfast to meetings to try to get home in time to pick up my kids from dance. Like, I don't miss any of that. And I'm kind of bummed to think that it's going to come back at some point. But there's something else that you said that I wanted to just unpack. You didn't say this word, but I know that this is a word that comes up a lot. Guilt. What is that about when you think about this idea of being selfish or taking or giving yourself permission to pause? Why does guilt come up?
Yeah, guilt and shame, right? Like, depending on what your script was, and I don't say you as in you, Jeannie, I mean you as in whoever's listening to this right now. Like, if you really sit back and just get away from all the language for a second, but think about how you were raised, like the lessons that showed up for you, the good and the bad, but they all provided some kind of lesson for you that became a narrative. You may have learned that you can't trust people because of something that you learned from the people that were supposed to be trusted, safe people, didn't provide for you. You may have learned that you have to give until there's nothing left in order to get attention, right? Or respect, or to be shown any kind of affection. I mean, there's all kinds of early scripts that were embedded, usually between your 3rd trimester of your mother's pregnancy and you being somewhere between 7 and 9 years old, which kind of ranges in the scientific studies from, behavioral scientists' perspective. So somewhere in that point, that's where all of those scripts were created. And then all of our habits after that, the things that we chose to do and not do, kind of imprinted those new scripts as chapters. Like, they started to have stories that came out of that. So one of the stories may have been, and I'll use myself as an example, which comes up for a lot of my clients, and it's why we relate so well. One of my stories was every single woman in my family, just the females specifically, they were all very hard workers. I can't think of one person who was in my life that was a female that didn't have somewhere between 2 and 5 jobs at one time, in addition to whatever their other, responsibilities were, wife, mother, girlfriend, whatever it is that they did. I wasn't raised in a church. I was raised in the hall, as a Jehovah's Witness. So, whatever their religious tenets and obligations were, they all had that in their life. And many of them had men that also worked, but didn't contribute to them emotionally, right? So that early script for me was, well, you have to be a hard worker. If you're not a hard worker, you're not you're not valuable. You're not going to be seen. You're not going to be heard. You're not going to be felt. So from 12 years on, you would not catch me with at least a minimum of 2 jobs, literally from the time I was 12 years old, all through college, degrees, masters, doctorate programs, birthing out babies, losing babies, marriages, marriages as in one. I'm still with him. Thank God I kept him. But, like with all of it, I always had multiple jobs. It wasn't until I became an entrepreneur almost 10 years ago that I really, like, all the scripts that I had started to expose themselves. Cause I didn't know, even though I'm a clinician and all those things, that's for other people, right? Like, I wasn't doing the work myself in that way. So I didn't realize how much that stuff, those narratives, those stories were coming up for me. And so when I transitioned into entrepreneurship, which is like 20 jobs in one, but that's not how other people perceive it. One of the things that came up for me was the guilt of like, oh, you chose the lazy path. Now, if you're an entrepreneur, there is nothing lazy about entrepreneurship.
Oh, yes.
Right.
Right.
But I was also buying into what other people would say. Like, they assume like, oh, you work for yourself, which means whenever I call you, you should be available. I should have access to you. Oh, don't let you not have a quote unquote brick and mortar office and you actually work from home because of your traveling or, whatever your particular role is. They thought, oh, what do you mean you're so busy? You work for yourself. Like, there was all these other things that were imprinting that guilt that I already had because of a narrative that was given to me at an earlier state in my life when I had no control over those early scripts that was coming up for me. And the shame that I had attached to, what do you mean you only have one job? Like, what is wrong with you? Like, don't you know that's not what quote unquote we do in this family? Like, my maiden name is Webster and Webster's work. Like, that is what you do. So there was a lot of that. And you can apply that across the board, like whatever your narrative is that's making you feel like if you're not staying at the computer, if you don't have 20 people working for you, if you don't have Maseratis and a real estate portfolio, you are somehow less than, and it's all tied to early scripts that we have to unthread from.
Ooh. That resonated on so many levels, what you just said. My challenge is I have an affinity for production, whatever I classify as production. But usually what's happening is there's stuff that I'm choosing not to look at. So my energy goes towards things I can control, things I can create, instead of just sitting with what's really going on here, which is really at the root of this idea of acknowledging where you are and giving that same care and feeding and attention back to yourself to ensure that you can continue forward and be the person and live on the stage that you always wanted to be on. That was amazing. Because the other thing that you talk about a lot is the most dangerous sentence for well-being. I already know.
Yep.
What is that about?
Yeah. And honestly, Jeannie, that's for everything, even in business, right? Like, when you have someone come to you and they've asked you a question, maybe they asked you for you're a strategist, so they'll ask you for some strategic guidance, and they're well off, well-to-do, had multiple businesses, done all kinds of things, but obviously they came to you for a reason. Whatever that gift in you that shows up so bright that they saw, they wanted that. And then you start to, answer their question, to give them the guidance, and they interrupt you with oh yeah, I already know. Well, there's one very surface way that we could look at that is like, that someone that has their ego in their way and they just don't want to hear, the hard part of the uncomfortable thing that they need to do. I'll go a little bit deeper in that and say, when people use the statement, I already know, and sometimes it's just a default, right? So you have to check when it just kind of flew out of your mouth versus when you're willing to pull it back and clean it up and see that it's coming out for a reason because you are scared of whatever this particular change is. I already know comes up for a lot of people when they know the technical thing, but they also know that they haven't been doing it. So instead of saying like, oh, well, Jeannie just told me that I need to hold my head up and fix my posture when I'm speaking. Because, as someone who interviews people for a living and holds these incredible warrior conversations with people to really let that come out of them, you're an expert at helping people shine their best when they're in these engaging and sometimes often crucial conversations, right? Mm-hmm. So if I come to you seeking advice, we're like, oh, Jeannie, you're amazing. How can I do what you're doing the way you're doing it? And then as soon as you start, giving me kind of fundamentals, I interrupt you with I already know. It's very possible that something you just started to share with me was a technique that I do know in terms of, the bullet point 1, 2, 3, but I'm clearly not embodying it, because the knowing and the embodying is different. And I say that all the time, especially around with well-being. Like, lots of people know that you should breathe and you should, relax your mind, and whatever version of meditation you're doing has, scientifically backed benefits. Yeah, you already know, but are you applying it? And the applying isn't always doing something. Sometimes it's being, which is why I say embody it. Because you could know to do the technique that Jeannie just told you to do, but you're not doing it, which is why you're not getting the results that Jeannie Cooper is getting. You know what I mean? Like that's why. But we'll look at you and say, well, I don't understand. Like, what are you doing that's so magical? Like, well, Jeannie's actually walking her talk. She's fully living the life she teaches, flaws and all. And if you're not doing it, that's why you're not getting similar results to, who she is and what she is and the outcome she's producing for her clients, right?
I love that, knowing it versus embodying it.
Yeah.
It's how often do you sit in those experiences where you're like, I know this, I know what I'm doing here is not working. I know what will work. Why aren't I doing it? Why aren't I putting that out into the world in a different way? I think that's so that is so important what you just said, the knowing versus embodying it. Mm-hmm. You also talk about this word strategy, about having the strategy of recharging your spirit. So all my A-typers, all of my executives that are listening to this, when they hear the word strategy, we all perk up. The strategy of recharging your spirit. What does that mean?
Yeah, thank you. That's a layered one, right? Because the strategy includes the advanced techniques, but more important than the techniques is your willingness to carry it through and be consistent with showing up fully for yourself, right? So like I can give you tips for, okay, every morning we're going to have a power I call it a power hour. Some people call it power up, whatever. Like there's a morning routine that's going to charge you, but your evening routine matters too. So I can walk you through strategy for what you can do based on who you are and what vibes with you. Because if you're someone who has fears around getting still because all the stuff gets exposed, like it triggers all your crap, then we're not going to dive right into meditating as part of your power up or your power down routine, right? So it does matter like who you are and what some of your triggers are for coming up. But one of the proven strategies to work is for everyone to have a power up and a power down, whatever you want to call it, routine, because they're like bookmarks for how your day is going to go. It's like choosing which book you're going to read today. If you choose to do a 3rd% version of what you normally know you need for your power up, where you're choosing the book that you're not really going to like by the time you're finishing it, because that your body needs 20 minutes or an hour to have that sacred space, to be able to have 5 minutes to have a space of gratitude and be thankful for all that you've achieved, to be able to imagine your next kind of phase of your life, to forgive yourself and to take action, which is the gift. Like that's the selfish, personal, intimate gift to yourself so you can create joy, is whatever is involved in your power up routine. But if you cut it off at just gratitude, right? Like if you're just the of gift for yourself and you gave yourself kind of a lazy version of it for whatever your reason or your justified excuse, but for whatever your reason is that morning, well, how well do you think your day is going to go, right? Like you're choosing to pick the book that you know you're not really interested in, but someone told you inside your narrative, inside your script, but you know, Jeannie's not Jeannie, Naketa's not Naketa if she doesn't read a book every day. So you chose the quickest, shortest, non-enriching book, this little 5-minute version of the 20-minute or hour version that you really need to gift yourself because you were trying to take a shortcut just to appease the little person in your mind that's telling you you're not good enough, you're not amazing, you're not worthy, you're not worth the wait, you're not valuable enough, you know, whatever your narrative is. In order to kind of shortcut yourself to it, you needed to read something even though it wasn't fulfilling. So like having a power up and a power down routine is super strategic for making sure that you set your day up and your evening up for success, because your evening predicates your tomorrow, right? Like I know everyone says new day, new slate. Not necessarily, because if you go to bed with all the yesterday crap all over your head, you are sleeping it. Your body is not healing because sleep is for your body to heal. Your body's not resting. You're not going all the way into REM sleep like you should, because that's the healing state and you get all the way past theta. Like that's really important in terms of like the 5 stages of sleep, which are about 5 90-minute cycles. And if you're not gifting yourself with that for your power down routine, then your body's not healing. So tomorrow you wake up with a stiff neck and you feel a little cranky, and you also didn't get any sex or good loving, you know, over that evening because you were so overstimulated by everything that was going on in your life that now you denied yourself that oxytocin boost that you needed, which would have come if you had a good orgasm. Okay. Like all of this stuff comes very well together. So part of the strategy is knowing and being willing and to be honest with yourself of what you really need, and really honoring your agreement with yourself to commit to giving yourself that gift every single day.
I know if I had a pen, I would have underlined that one piece there is making sure you're honoring the commitment you're making to yourself.
Yeah.
Because it's really easy to step out of that, to be helpful to someone else, to be in service to someone else, to say, I don't have time for this. I really want to be doing X, Y, and Z. And recognizing that if it's strategic, it's a part of your power up or your power down. I love that. One of the things that I started doing with my power down, this might be a technique that everybody listening might enjoy. And this is not, I did not come up with it, but a colleague recommended it to me, is if I'm sitting with stuff that's on my mind and I'm getting into bed and I'm trying to do the things that I need to do to shut my brain off, I recognize that I am a thinker. I like to sometimes overprocess things. Mm-hmm. So I will say out loud, and I personally believe in divinity and the universal order of things. And I'll say, okay, universe, I need you to take this off my mind. Here's what I'm worried about, or here's what I'm trying to solve for. Can you take that off of my mind so I can sleep? And if you feel as though it's something that I need to work on while I'm sleeping, help it be integrated into my sleep in some ways. And then if I'll even get more detailed, as if you could help me come up with a solution by the morning, that would be wonderful. But I just start to talk. And then a lot of times I'll put gratitudes. Thank you for helping me resolve that issue. Thank you for allowing a great conversation with my oldest daughter about something that was a sticky subject. And I'll sometimes talk out loud to myself for like a solid 5 minutes. Mm-hmm. It is so important and a part of my power down. And I can't tell you how many times it has really helped me take it out of my mind, out of my heart, and give it up to something, again, in my mind, is more of a divine process. Mm-hmm. That is so important to how I power down a day. So I love the language too. And it's super simple. Power up, power down.
Mm-hmm. No, I love that. And I would like to reflect that some of what you're doing is it's like embedded as a layered technique all in that 5 minutes that you're giving yourself. In that 5 minutes, you're resting your body. You're relaxing your mind. You're releasing your weighted emotions. You're rewiring your brain with new rituals. Like you're telling your brain, which is there to keep you safe, right? That this is okay. Like this process of reflecting and asking and receiving, all, and I'm like going deeper in that because many people, especially women, have a hard time asking and receiving. And in that little 5-minute routine that you're doing, you're saying that this is okay for me to do this. You're recalibrating your energy management center, right? Like you're refueling your spirit, you're refocusing on what really matters to you, and you're reconnecting at a deeper level, at a soul level, with what's really important. So the next day, when you wake up, even if the question wasn't answered, right? Like, let's go a little further and say, oh, that daggone sticky situation, whatever it was, I still don't feel like I have an answer to it. Your subconscious brain was at work getting that answer in. So at some point during the day, you feel like, oh, I've just like manifested, all these great things. You made room to receive more of those things because your subconscious had something to work on. That's all it wants. It wants something. It's like, don't have a worker bee that doesn't have work, right? Your subconscious is constantly working, and you gave it permission to relax, back up, and let everything else flow to you. And even if it takes a couple of days, a couple of weeks, heck, a couple of years for you to receive that answer, it's now flowing to you versus you chasing after it. And in the interim of you waiting for that quote unquote one solution to that sticky situation that you asked to receive, a download of clarity around, all the other things in your life that were being untangled and you couldn't put your finger on, like, why is everything like just jamming right now? Like, oh my God, like everything is amazing. It was because of that one thing that you gifted yourself in that 5 minutes that night. And when you do it consistently, you allow your brain to really untether and separate all of the crap that you were literally kind of anchored to from those emotions of guilt and shame and regret and resentment and all of those things that were holding you into a space you didn't even know you were bound to prior to you implementing that new technique. So I just want to celebrate you for a moment.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for saying that back to me. And I was smiling, thinking, it's my new team member. It's Team Coomber. Mm-hmm. Team Coomber, this team member on Team Coomber does a lot of the work when I'm sleeping, which who wouldn't want more productivity when you're sleeping? Thank you for that. So, of course, we have to talk about where the word no plays into this. I have a plaque on my desk, and a friend of mine bought it for me for Christmas last year. And all it says is nope, period. So talk to me about how saying no plays into this idea of permission to pause.
Yes, it's one of my favorite words, according to my kids. They're like, your favorite word is no. Like, yes, it is. And you should be so thankful that it is, because your mama, prior to this moment in her life, before she had the guts, you know what I mean? The chutzpah to say no, was saying yes to so many things that was a distraction from the two of them that mattered most in my life at that time. I mean, they still matter, but they're young adults now. So, I get a little bit more reprieve. I can focus on the grandkids. No literally makes room for your opportunity of yes, right? Like I tell people all the time, say no to as many opportunities that come your way as possible to make room for the yes you really want. Like that's one of the, the simple, sweet joys of no. You're not saying no to be mean. You're not saying no to be arrogant. You're not saying no because you think you're good enough. You're too good, or better than the person who's asking you to do something, go somewhere, commit to something. You're saying no because you're being truthful about what really matters to you, which is the definition of balance for me. And you and I have talked about this many, many times over many, many moon conversations. Balance, the kind of definition of it is really admitting your truth of what you really want, and then creating some boundaries so you can achieve that truth as your new reality, whatever it is. So if your truth is, I'm going to make, I'll make up a number, $2 million by the end of 2021. If that's your truth, then you need to create some boundaries to achieve the realities of that truth. If that's who you're claiming that you're embracing, this new version of Naketa, this new version of Lily, this new version of Tina, Tanya, David, whoever's listening to this right now, if that's what you're saying is really your truth, because you've anchored it to your why, you know, what this does for your family, how it gives you freedom, flexibility, confidence to walk boldly into your new kind of goal as a major secret philanthropist, you know, whatever it is that you want to do. If that's your truth, then we need some no's in there. And that no, again, isn't to be mean or mean spirited. And you should always give a no with integrity and with gentle honesty. Like you have to stand in that, because there is something underneath of your yes and your no called karma. You can give a bunch of yeses, but if you're giving that yes and then resenting what you just did and now moving into a space of regret, you are lowering your vibration, and you're attracting a lot of resenting, regretful, angering type of situations, people and places and things into your life, because karma is attached to wherever you stand in integrity. So you have to be really mindful about like honoring your statement, honoring your words. And integrity is really doing what you say you're going to do and saying what you say you're going to say, right?
That is so powerful. What you just said, karma is attached. I mean, I'm nodding like a crazy person. I know everyone that's listening has absolutely been in those situations where you say yes and you're angry about it. I shouldn't have said it. I know better. I didn't listen to my truth or my inner guidance system. I should have said no. Because the other thing that I was thinking about, a yoga teacher once said to me, this was a part of the talk that kicked off the class, is I'm not saying no to you. I'm saying yes to me.
Exactly.
And that just highlighted that for me. Oh, Naketa, that was gold right there.
So as we're smile.
As we're wrapping up this conversation, I mean, there are so many amazing things that you've just put into this conversation. I'd like to hear from you personally as a balance and relationship advisor. What are you working on for you? What are you trying to get better at as you're going into 2021?
Oh my goodness, so many things. 2020 has exposed so much for all of us, me included. You know, I have more clients than I can handle, which is fantastic, because it exposed a lot of things for my power couples. Like, oh, I really don't like that he chews so loud. Why is this bothering me? I want a divorce, right? You know, and we like joke about those things because it's like funny, but it's also real, right? Like 2020 was definitely exposing a lot of the things that people didn't even know mattered to them or what they wanted to work on. And I'm not exempt from that. I am a balance and relationship advisor that still receives coaching. I will always be coached. I will always have advisors. I will always have my brain trust, my sister circles, people that I pour into in my most vulnerable state, because I need to make room for the growth that's constantly happening every morning that I'm privileged to have breath in my body. So for 2021, one of the really important kind of crucial things that I'm working deeply on is making room for the people who have supported me. Something that I have been, unfortunately, like a master at is I can close someone out really, like it takes me a long time. It's really hard. Like you have to I don't mean this physically, but you have to like beat me to a pulp for me to be like, I guess you were probably not in good intention for me, right? Like before I like give up on you. And I mean that emotionally, spiritually, with all that. But then once I get that refined clarity of, okay, this Donna person, this David person, they really did not have good intentions. Regardless of how it started, that's not where they are with me. This relationship is no longer serving me, and I will literally delete them from the universe. Like, I mean that with so much love. They are deleted across all realms, time, space, and dimensions of my reality. And I'll do the work to detach from any emotions I have there. So we could be in the same room on the same panel. And just like I would say good morning to everyone else, I'll include them, but that's it. There's no mystery. There's no walking down memory lane, any of that. And that has served me well up to a point. What I realized though, is it gave me an edge to myself that doesn't actually feel good to me anymore. Like, I don't like that edge is there. Like, it served me, when I needed, to have some protection, right? Like from being overused, if you will, and all those people are out of my life right now. But it also gave me an edge that just, it's ripping my favorite blouse. Like, I don't like that this rough part of me doesn't feel good anymore. So that's what I'm personally working on. Is being able to still, de-story those situations, those narratives that were created out of those relationships and experiences. An example would be an aunt, my father's sister, biological sister, reached out to me literally today. Well, the day, I know we're pre-recording this, but today on Facebook, and said, I would really like to get to know you better, and it would be great to, to rekindle a relationship. And my first response, which I did reply, so I'll be honest about that, was, I don't even know you. Like, I really don't. Like, I don't, I think I was like 5 or 6. Like, I don't even, like, I really don't even truly remember her. And she is my father's only living sibling. And their mother, my grandmother, who I never met, died when he was 12 years old. So like, she's really kind of like last standing out of the two of them. My father is still living, but he's heavily drug addicted, in and out of prison. So he's not accessible, right, for all the things. So she happens to be, and I have no idea what her situation is. Let me be really clear about that. She just reached out on Facebook. But my first reaction was the edge. It was the, like, what? Like, I don't even know you. Like, why are you reaching out to me, right? Like, that kind of protective. And I did send that message. And I also sent it with like, my only memories of you were like very early memories, like blurs of me, like being on the porch with her daughter, my cousin, who actually died from HIV, many years later. So she responded lovingly and said, you're right. I haven't seen you since you were a little girl, which is why I would like to get to know you better now. I was like, okay, we'll take this slow. I'll set up a virtual tea, 20 minutes, woman. That's all you get. I didn't say that, but, you get 20 minutes. I put it out a couple of weeks to give myself some space to not be overly occupied by that thing. But that's me kind of walking forward into the T in that GIFT of the gift of selfishness is taking action. There's the gratitude, there's the imagining, there's the forgiveness, and then there's taking action. And that's the fullness of the gift for any of the healing that I may need to do for that relationship, which, as far as I know, surface wise, I don't know that we have any particular problems or issues, but maybe there is something under the fact that you are my only female paternal aunt and you've never been a part of my life, right?
Wow. Talk about someone who is walking their talk. You just embodied everything that you just shared in this conversation, just being truthful and honest, setting boundaries, but then also giving yourself the gift of compassion, self-understanding. I almost felt like you just nurtured that little girl and said, it's okay. I'm going to take it slow and we'll see what's here. And you didn't have to do any of that. You could have ignored that request, but you chose to face it and think about it and see what that could do to raise your experience in this life. So, Naketa, that was so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. What a great way to end this conversation. I could literally sit here with you the entire day and just bring you to all of my meetings and all of my interactions. So for everyone listening, if you want to connect with Naketa, you can find her, Ask Naketa, on Instagram. You could also visit thigpro.com, and you could also follow her podcast, Balance Boldly. It's out on iTunes, among other platforms. And I am just so deeply grateful for you, Naketa, especially as I reflect on the year, the places that I've been since I began this journey. You were one of the very first people to extend tremendous amount of generosity and kindness to me when I talked about getting into the podcast space probably 3 or 4 years ago now. And I just feel so blessed to have you in my path. So thank you again for sharing yourself here this morning.
Mutual feelings. Thank you for honoring this space and creating it for these conversations. You are a warrior, and I appreciate you.
Oh, thank you. Thanks to everybody for listening to another episode of Warriors at Work and letting us be a part of your warrior journey. You can ask questions and make suggestions for future topics at jc@jeanniecoomber.com. Connect with me personally on LinkedIn and Instagram, and join us on the Warrior Conversations channel on YouTube and at the Warrior Magic Community page on Facebook. You can find links to all these places on my website, jeanniecoomber.com, and most importantly, be sure to tell friends about us, subscribe, rate, and review us on iTunes, Spreaker, and Spotify. It helps others find the show and puts more warrior magic out into the world.